So the bodice is kind of like in a good ways, and the next step, I can't quite finish the bodice until I attach the skirt, because the bodice is going to close at the back with a long zipper. And the zipper is going to go into the skirt. So I'll need to sew the skirt to the bodice before inserting the zipper, and inserting the zipper is what finishes the bodice. Or should I put sleeves in first? I hate sleeves. Everyone hates sleeves. I usually leave the sleeves for last, but it's usually easier to set them on if you don't have a heavy full dress. Whatever, let's go on to the skirt. So, I know Editing Cat wants to do, I talk about her like she's a different person, but she's just me, but more panicked 3 days in the future. I know I want to do some sort of display maybe here about how to do the skirt, but just in case, I also brought this so that you can tell how I'm going to do this. So the whole idea behind this is that I'm not going to use a pattern, because I kind of want to learn more about drafting my own patterns and show you guys how that can be done as well, because with lockdown and stuff it's just hard to get patterns, and sometimes they can be a bit of a drawback. I know sometimes they can be on sale and really easy to get, but sometimes they're not, and sometimes pattern instructions can be quite daunting as well. And I never really follow them, I just get the pieces and then do my own stick. But so yeah, I wanted to show you how to draft the skirt if you want to. So the skirt is going to be 6 panels. And that sounds like a lot, however, no one complains about full skirts, right? Like, once you start twirling, you can't stop. That should be my hashtag. Yeah, so the way this works is, there'll be 3 panels. So there'll be 1, 2, and 3 at the front, and then the same at the back. The panels will be slightly curved on either side to give some shaping to the waist, and then I'm going to flare them out as much as I can without looking ridiculous. But my whole point is to use as much fabric as I can to really fill out that hem. So ideally this would be like a full circle skirt, but we've talked about, I think, about the complexities of making long circle skirts, and the easiest way to do that is usually to just make panels or gore them so that you can get a full length skirt. So this is not going to be full length, but it'll probably be mid calf or maybe a little bit lower. I like long skirts, they're just more comfortable for me, and especially with the winter it just makes more sense for me. So the way to draft this panel, or at least the way I shall attempt, I don't know if Editing Cat will add a notice here saying it failed. But yeah, so the way I'm going to do this is, so the top of the panel will be equal to 1/6 of your waist plus ease. Ease is up to you. I don't usually add a lot of ease to my waist, and then I find if I sew all the seams and it does need a little bit of ease, I can just take it away from the seams. I usually don't add that much, or any really. So I'll do 1/6 of my waist at the top, and then I will curve the sides by, imagine it's on a grid, and then so I'll do 1/6 of my waist here, and then do like 1/2 inch, and then square out 3 inches down, and then just round it out with my French curve. And then I'm gonna measure down straight from the middle point down to the desired length of the skirt, and then I'll square that out as well, and then I'll decide on the angle of the fullness, so as much width as I can get, and just square that out, and then make sure that's equal to the same from the middle, and then round out the bottom. I know that for patterns that involve skirts like this, they usually have one pattern piece for each section, which to me I find mental. So instead what I'm going to do is, the front and the back panel will be different, simply because I want to match those seams up with the seams on the bodice, so the princess seams, so that the panel will fit in just right there, and the same at the back. I didn't think of this when I was making the bodice, and so it's not, the front is not equal to 1/6 of my waist, and neither is the back, so that's going to need some slight adjustment, but I think it'll be fine. So all I've done is I've recalculated it so that those 2 panels at the front have the distance in between the seams, and then I can just adjust the others to make sure that the total measurement of all the top of the panels is equal to my waist. I hope this made sense. I really hope I can put in a little graphic here that makes more sense than my hand gestures, but we'll see what I can do in editing. Shut up. Yeah, so that's the game plan. I'm going to draft the skirt now. Wish me luck. I will not be doing a mock-up because I hate doing mock-ups of skirts. They're not time consuming, but they're fabric consuming, and I just don't have the fabric to spare on that. I don't have a lot of calico left, and I like using it for structured elements, and I don't really have any spare fabric I can use for mock-ups of skirts. So I'm gonna draft them all out on the fabric because somehow I've become chaotic neutral. Chaotic evil? No. But yeah, so I'm going to draft them all on the skirt and then just remeasure to make sure that my waist measurement is correct. And also, this is important if you have a body shape like mine, where your hips are much larger than your waist. It's important to measure down and make sure that with the angle that you flared out from the top, that there's enough room on the hip line to accommodate your hips. Usually your hip line is like 10 to 12 inches below your waist. Just measure there and make sure it's at least 1/6 of your hips. Yeah. Don't forget to do that, Kat. You just recorded it. Don't forget. Okay, cool. See you guys. Okay, so I fixed the bodice problems, so we're gonna cut out the skirt now. Wish me luck. After cutting out the pieces, I was toying with the idea of flatlining it. To confirm it was the right decision, I pinned all the side seams and hung up the skirt. The fabric was a little limp, so I decided to interline it. I placed my pattern pieces on the same black cotton twill I used to interline the bodice. I had to trim away a little bit of the flare of the center front panel because the cotton twill was narrower than the wool, and I didn't have enough fabric left to accommodate this. Now that I had all of my pieces, I basted each skirt panel to its corresponding twill panel with long stitches. The next step was to sew up all the seams. Quick side note to you guys, because I've complained about it on my Instagram stories, but not on this video. So these are the back panels, and I've realized that I made a pretty drastic cutting error where I made them too small, so they won't fit me without this 1.5 inch wedge. I thought about recutting them, but I don't have enough fabric to recut the whole of the back. So instead I've made up this piecing. We are back to piecing. And so I just made this wedge. I decided to add it to this curve here because it was a lot easier. And I think it'll be pretty discreet once it's actually sewn into the back. So I'm just going to piece this together now, iron it, and then start assembling the skirt. So I'm just standing here looking at my sewn side seams, thinking, oh yeah, I was going to use an alternative method for finishing these seams because I should have time to fill them, and then I pressed them open and filled them. But realised that I haven't added pockets! I mean, it's not the worst because all I have to undo really is the side seam stitching because I haven't actually sewn down the seams yet. But I just like to one of these days make one skirt where I actually put in the pockets at the right time. So, as per the fashion on this channel, I unpicked the top of the side seams and then slotted in the pocket pieces. The pocket pieces have 2 pieces each pocket, sewn together along the curved edge, leaving the top and pocket mouth unsewn. The pocket mouth gets pinned to this side seam gap and sewn into place by hand. Then the top is basted to the waistline where it will be caught in the seam once it is sewn to the bodice. I then proceeded to flat fell all of the seams. I also did the bodice's seams at this point. I mentioned flat felling in pretty much every video, so I assume you guys are tired of the explanations. The next step was to pin the skirt to the bodice. I made sure to baste this carefully since there were so many seams to align. I then pinned and sewed the zipper in. I don't have much footage of this because it doesn't really matter which way you look at it, it's still awful. I hate zippers. The back facing then gets the raw edges turned under and whip stitched by hand to the zipper, giving it a nice smooth finish. The last big element missing are the sleeves. I used a simple pattern I already had from a previous dress of a wide gathered sleeve. Both the top and the bottom will be gathered. I cut this out of the wool material. I did not interline or line them because I wanted them to be quite light. I then sewed up the side seams and flat felled them too. I also sewed 2 rows of long stitches across the top of the sleeve and the bottom. I moved on to working on the cuffs. I cut these out of some scraps of red velvet I had. I then interfaced them and basted them onto fabric and slotted it into an embroidery hoop. I used a mix of gold thread, beads and sequins to make a starry design. I quite love the effect, so here's an excessive amount of close-ups. I marked the seam allowance on the interior of the cuffs. I decided to hand sew these on to make sure I didn't accidentally go over any of the embroidery. I pulled on the bobbin threads of the 2 rows of stitching on the bottom of the sleeve until they were gathered to the right measurement. Then I pinned them to the cuffs, right sides together, and sewed it with the back stitch. Then the cuffs are flipped up and over. I turned under the raw cuff edge and whip stitched it into place. I did most of the finishing touches on the sofa, so I don't have a lot of footage. I sewed all of the buttons by hand with silk thread into place. There are 11 at the center front and 2 on each cuff. For whatever reason, thread loops were not working out for me, though I've done them before. So, using the same red silk thread I used for the buttons, I tried these chain stitch carriers from my vintage Singer sewing book. Here are the book instructions. You basically cast on and then use your fingers to loop the thread into a chain stitch and then secure it down. I did these for the center front and the cuffs. They are super cute, functional and easy to make. The very last step was to hem the dress. I tried it on and marked where the hem should be. I then trimmed the bottom accordingly. I used nearly all of my scraps to cut strips, which were sewn into one long strip. This is then pinned right sides together and sewn by machine, creating a hem facing. This is pressed open and inwards, rolling in slightly to make sure it's on the inside. I pin it into place and then use the herringbone stitch to sew the facing to the interlining only by hand. I also made a last minute decision to add a quick belt. It's just a pleated section of the red velvet interfaced over the back and with 2 hooks and eyes. Now that I see I like it with the dress, I'll definitely go back and finish it better. And that is it. Overall, I'm really happy with it. I think it's sort of a magical dress, and I can't wait to wear it more often. If you've got a moment, please consider checking out my Patreon. There is a link up in the description box and on the cards. Thank you for watching.